When I first came to Clayoquot Sound, I was just arrived from Australia and came out here to camp, like a lot of people did, and wasn't terribly aware that there was any great importance about this place, except it just rained a lot, and there was a bit of surf, and there was a pub at the end of the road, and that's about all I noticed when I first came out here. What I found here as a journalist was a sort of almost classic set-piece standoff between, the industrial juggernaut of forestries that have been practiced for decades in British Columbia, and a really powerful knot of resistance in the form of local people and First Nations people who just sort of decided that they didn't want Clayoquot Sound to get trashed just like everywhere else on Vancouver Island had been trashed. And it was nasty. I mean, people were chained to bulldozers and camp out in trees, and the RCMP would arrive with a process server and he'd tell people they couldn't do this, and they'd say we're not moving, and the cops would arrest everybody and drag them off kicking and screaming, and we'd film it, and then everyone would go to the pub, and occasionally they'd go outside the pub and bang heads, and and then you do it all over again, day in, day out.
The 1993 blockades really forced the issue toward making some kind of practical steps to apply the principles for the sustainable development.
They were the pure environmentalists who just said, we want to save the forest because we want to save the forest, or we need to save the forest for the critters, whatever else. But a lot of people were talking about the forest being worth more standing than not, in terms of the diversity of values of the forest for all people, but were surprisingly inarticulate about what that really meant, how you could actually have an economy. Is it jobs versus the environment? That was the classic standoff. This place is quite remarkable globally for the fact that people took a stand here and didn't get shoved aside. I think that EcoTrust was also the ground floor of helping the Clayoquot Biosphere Project get off the ground, and I think that was a tremendously important contribution. The Biosphere Project didn't last forever, but while it was in place, it did become a kind of anchor for local science.
One of those things was the naming of this region as a United Nations Biosphere Reserve. For some people that means basically nothing changes, and for other people it means that the principles of sustainable conservation, economic development have to be applied across the board.
I think one of the bedrock ideas of EcoTrust was, and still is, this concept of information democracy. Information democracy is really, firstly, a leveling of the playing field, in terms of who owns the information and who owns the analysis. EcoTrust came along, and EcoTrust is using information tools for community empowerment, for want of a better word, and they're also talking about the economy in a way that no one else was talking about the economy. It wasn't jobs versus the environment, it was a kind of not a collision, it was a sort of coherence of the two. The real challenge is there, and I think it's the EcoTrust challenge, is there actually a way to have a reliably prosperous society whereby you are not degrading the ecology of the region, but you are not keeping the ecology of the region protected on the backs of keeping people poor.